All right, and welcome on my next guest. We've got Mark Willard, KNBR sports radio host from San Francisco. Mark, is everything going for you?
Everything is going fantastic, Zach. What's going on with you?
Not much, not much. I'm ready for the draft. I assume you guys are too because you're making some moves.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, things got a lot more exciting last week when the 49ers pulled off what, many are calling the biggest trade in franchise history, which, it took, I think, some people a few days to really wrap their head around that that's what this is, because in this moment, there are still no players that have traded places, it's just draft picks. But if you really look at what the cost of a draft pick is and what this particular move means for the franchise going forward, I agree with it. This is a landmark trade for this entire organization.
You think it's bigger than trading a conditional third for a disgruntled Trent Williams?
Yeah, I do. Even though that ended up being a really big one and a really nice one for the 49ers, that obviously with his new deal is going to mean something going forward. But as we know, there's only one position that's the most important position in American sports, and that's what this one is about. And it's controversial. It's got different opinions to it. It's a bold move because if they get it wrong, these are the kinds of decisions that can get coaches fired. Yeah. So this is the one.
Who do you think they're targeting that they wanted to get all the way up to 3?
I don't know what's inside Kyle's mind, but I can tell you this from this conceptual standpoint. I don't understand the idea of being this bold and trading up to get someone who does not have the potential to be a star. Yeah. It's not just about production. It's not just about we got to find a guy that fits Kyle Shanahan's system. There are two things here. I don't believe Kyle Shanahan is being painted accurately here. He's being painted as a guy who wants a coachable, systematic quarterback, as if he doesn't like great athleticism. He does. Every coach does. They want the athletes. They want great players. I'm not saying Mac Jones won't be a great player. Maybe he will be. But to me, there's very little chance that Mac Jones becomes an it quality type star. And do you make a move like this to go get someone who's not a star? There's winning and then there's stars. Those are two different things in sports. Sometimes we forget the entertainment aspect of this. I don't know between Justin Fields and Trey Lance if either of them are stars, but I know they've got a chance to be. And I don't think Mac Jones does. So I would vote for Trey Lance, but that's just me. I trust Kyle Shanahan's view on this. But I'll be surprised if it's not Fields or Lance.
What spot did they have initially before they traded up?
They were in number 12. They were number 12, and what's really interesting is that they firmly believe that 12 is on the outside looking in of this entire conversation. And that's often the case in today's day and age of NFL drafts. Teams get aggressive and move up for the quarterbacks. This is a good quarterback draft. Obviously, they think all 5 guys are going to be gone by number 12.
Do you think they overpaid?
It's hard to say at this point. There's no such thing as overpaying if you can find a star quarterback. So, I think that if they land the right pick, then no. But we won't know that yet.
Because Kyle Shanahan was in D.C., correct me if I'm wrong, when they went all in for RG3, and that did not go well.
No, but he also, did they go all in? Because a couple rounds later, they also drafted Kirk Cousins.
That's true.
And I think the Shanahans had a lot to say about that. Yeah. So, look, RG3 did work out when he first got there.
That first year was great. First year was great.
As a rookie, it was fantastic. And then injuries derail it. And that sort of, I think, is part of what led to this idea that Kyle doesn't want someone that can move outside the pocket because of injuries. So, I don't really think that's the case, but it's always a risk. It's always a risk. I mean, the percentages through the years show that you're not going to nail it every time when it comes to early draft picks, especially quarterbacks. So it's really hard. I think that's why whoever they draft, I'm a proponent of them keeping Jimmy Garrapolo for at least one more year, letting him be the starter this year, and then see what you got as far as unveiling the new guy the year after that. Very, very similar to what the Chiefs did with Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes.
Well, Nick Mullins had that great Thursday night game a couple years ago, and I thought he was like the second coming of Christ, but then he kind of fell off. Do you think the incompletion to Sanders in the Super Bowl, kind of just that mental error, has maybe made them think, okay, maybe he's not the guy?
I think it goes a lot deeper than that. I don't ever think you make decisions like this about $25 million quarterbacks based on one play. In fact, I will state all of the things that happened prior to that throw that suggest Kyle Shanahan was not sure about trusting Jimmy Garapolo. Only 8 throws in the game against Green Bay, even though it worked out well. Right before halftime against Kansas City, when they had over a minute on the clock and they just kind of took a knee and did not want to let Jimmy move the ball and try to get more points on the board. Those things all suggested that Kyle was a little bit short of full trust in his quarterback. And then when you see what eventually happened in the fourth quarter, I think it only added to that.
So you do think, regardless of who they take, you still think Garoppolo's got the job for one more year?
I think he should. I think the 49ers and this coaching staff have been very clear that, every single game and every single season is precious. And when you're coming off 2 out of the last 3 seasons that have sort of been derailed by injury, and you react this way, it suggests that, they are not a group that's like, well, let's build and let's wait and let's, maybe this will be good for 2022. I think they feel like every year needs to be at its best. And even if they nail this quarterback pick, rookies are not going to go win the Super Bowl. And so their best chance to win this year is with Jimmy.
Interesting. And then with the Trent Williams contract, did that number surprise you a little bit? Because I know he's 31, 32, or did you knew they were going to give him a blank check?
32 years, but I would actually I would debate whether they gave him a blank check. The 49ers and Parag Marathe are amazing with the way they structure contracts. If you do a deep dive on this deal, the 6th year is really a fake year. I don't think there's any chance that he's still playing or that they honor that 6th year. I think that 6th year was totally based on making it look like he's the highest paid offensive lineman in history. But if you go year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, Bakhtiari's deal with Green Bay is still bigger. So that was some window dressing to send the message that they think Trent Williams is the best in the league, because he is. But at his age and with what he wanted and the salary cap situation that was in existence right now, especially with all the COVID issues, they were not going to be able to actually go to whatever that averages out to per year, $24 million. For instance, I think this year it's only 8. So it's a great deal for 4 years, and I expect that to be what it is.
Are you buying any of these reports about Justin Fields, or do you think he's in the mix at 3-2?
Well, I totally think he's in the mix. What are the reports you're referring to?
Dan Orlowski said on Pat McAfee's show yesterday that he's heard from some people that apparently Fields is a last guy in, first guy out kind of guy. It kind of sparked some people on Twitter, but I think it's smoke screens. And the thing is, if it was San Fran doing that, you don't need a smoke screen because he'll be there at 3. So I don't think it's San Fran.
Yeah, it's funny because they even talked about on Monday when they had their most recent meeting, Kyle and John talked about how the beauty of moving up to 3 is that they don't need to run so many smoke screens anymore. However, I think that in and of itself is probably a smoke screen too, because that's what these guys are conditioned to do this time of year. So there will always be 1,000 statements that when the draft comes, we can look back on them and say that wasn't real. Remember last year, the 49ers were absolutely unequivocally taking a receiver with that first pick. They ended up taking a defensive lineman. They got a receiver later in the first round with another deal. So you never know exactly what's going on. I think Fields is definitely in the mix. As I mentioned, my hope is it's Trey Lance. But I also think, how much are we hearing that it's definitely Mac Jones, which is weird because that came seemingly 24 hours after nobody thought there was any way Mac Jones was going to be a top 5 pick. And I still don't believe he will be. So, look, all of the guys are in the mix, except for in another way, they're not, because you don't make that deal unless Kyle knows who he wants. So I firmly believe he already knows who his guy is.
Why is Trey Lance your guy? What have you seen out of him that you like?
Well, I just think there's a couple things there. Number one, from an athletic standpoint, from a footwork standpoint, from an accuracy standpoint, from an arm strength standpoint, I put him right next to, if not above, what I saw from Justin Fields and Mac Jones. And I don't mean that just from a pro day standpoint. Secondly, and more importantly, I don't really buy into the whole like, oh gosh, small school. He struggled against other small schools. North Dakota State is a quarterback factory at a smaller level, but a quarterback factory. And so why that's important is they ask more of their quarterbacks at the line of scrimmage than some of the major schools do. Yeah. What did Mac Jones really need to do with the best offensive line in the country in front of him? So I think they do in some ways come in more pro ready because more has been asked of them. The last two North Dakota State quarterbacks are in the pros. We could debate whether Carson Wentz has been great or bad. Somewhere in between, he's been a little bit of both. But I don't think at any point did Carson come into the league and we looked at him and went, oh gosh, he's just inexperienced and not ready because he's never seen the bright lights. No, he was an MVP candidate in his second year. He looks fantastic. So I'm not worried by that at all. I think he's got all of the makeup, both physically and mentally, and the things that you do in the pros, he was asked to do at North Dakota State. So for me, that's the guy.
And so looking at the Niners roster as a whole, I know in the last couple of years we've had a couple of guys break out. What am I drawing a blank? Last year, kind of Fred Warner kind of came onto the national scene. The year before, George Kittle. Who's that guy this year?
It's a good question. I would say Brandon Ayuk. And I know he had, some moments where he popped even last year. But he also dealt with injuries. There were COVID situations. Like he only really had about half the games. And I think he is just fantastic. I think he's kind of a unicorn in some of the things that he can do on a football field. And we've only seen him scratch the surface. Their receiver situation was so muddied last year based on injuries at that position and lack of efficient play at the quarterback position. And he was still able to have some really nice games. If you can get some stability and talent at the quarterback position, get 15 or 16 games out of him where maybe Debo is on the other side as well. I think there's just not much that he can't do from that position. And I think he could have a really big year.
And then going back to the quarterbacks, do you think just seeing all the supreme talent at the position around the division, especially with the Rams going after Matt Stafford, made Shanahan say, you know what, we have to get our guy and I'll do anything it takes?
Well, this furthers my point about a Trey Lance or a Justin Fields. Take a look at the lay of the land in the NFL. Are you, Kyle Shanahan, going to go, okay, we got Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson in our division, and now Matt Stafford is added. And then on a bigger scale, we're going to be dealing with, for the next decade, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. You're going to look at that and say, go give me Mac Jones because he'll do what I tell him to do. Doesn't make any sense. He can be smart as a whip and he can make all the right decisions, but I believe he can be athletically overwhelmed by the players who are going to be on the other side of the ball. You're taking a knife to a gunfight if you draft Mac Jones and expect him to be able to outplay those guys for the next 10 years.
I think he's Saban's long lost kid. They look really similar, and it's a little odd. And you guys,
he could be a good player. He could be a good player. I know Tom Brady's not some crazy athlete, but it's not that he can't be a good player. He can be a very, very good player. But to me, that bold move and the lay of the land in the NFL, I don't quite understand it if that is the move.
Do you think they reached out to any of the former Niners quarterbacks, maybe Jeff Garcia, Montana, or Steve Young, to say, what do you think of this guy before we make this major move, or no?
Probably not. I don't know that the relationship is like that. This is a newer regime that hasn't worked directly with those guys, but I do know that Steve Young has definitely weighed in on this quite a bit, and stays very close to what's going on with the organization. I don't think Joe does as much. Garcia does to a degree, but Young obviously has that thump as a Hall of Famer, and Young said some things very similar to what I'm telling you right now, which is that Kyle Shanahan is branded as somebody who likes these like controllable robotic pocket passes. This is ridiculous. And in fact, even earlier in the week when Kyle was asked, like, is Kirk Cousins your prototype? He said, that's ridiculous. Kirk's a great quarterback, but he's not my prototype. And then he immediately started talking about Patrick Mahomes. So the idea is somehow that Kyle doesn't want athleticism because he wants somebody he can control, I think is the biggest error people make when they're analyzing this.
And then one more question about Trey Lance. When you watch him play, who does he remind you of?
Man, you know, I'll say it this way because I'll defer to someone who's watched him a lot more than I. I had on my show last week the play-by-play man for North Dakota State, and we threw out some names, and he said the best comp for him is Josh Allen. He said, you know, people say that same thing, like he was a wild arm and unpredictable and went to a smaller school at Wyoming, and it did take a year or two for it to really click, but then it did. And as far as the skill set and his size, he's maybe not quite as big as Josh, but he can be that presence running the ball. He really likes the comp of Josh Allen, and if that's the case, it's a pretty good comp.
Awesome. And then I know do you guys have opening day today, or you guys canceled for COVID too?
No. Opening day is, knock on wood, as of now, ready to go between the Giants and Mariners.
What's your bold prediction for the baseball season?
Bold prediction for the baseball season is the Dodgers do not win the National League West. And I'm not saying that the Giants do. And you know, you can put two and two together in terms of who I might like there. But I think the NL West is just getting better and better and better at every turn, and the Dodgers deserve credit for that because they've pushed the other teams. And I think the Padres can give them a run this year.
And then out near me, Orioles or Nats doing anything this year, or is this another year just kind of enjoy the games, but you're not really going anywhere?
Well, I think that the Nationals are completely an interesting team. I mean, Juan Soto, if you talk to people inside baseball, believe that he might be, the most complete young player that the game has seen, not just now, but for a long time. I mean, if you put to GMs right now, I'll give you Soto or Acuna, I think you'd be surprised how many people would take Soto. So, look, the National League East is a beast. There's no question about that. But that's still a team that has a lot of talent and can get themselves into the mix for sure.
And then are the Padres going to be the real deal this year? Or do you think they're a flash in the pan?
Real deal. That team has built themselves for depth. I know everybody's only looking at Tatis right now, but that is a team that is, I don't want to call them injury proof, but they are ready with people behind even the people that are currently on the team. And their pitching staff is set, and they've still got more young talent coming up in their farm system, which is excellent. I don't think the Padres are just good this year. I think they're good for a while.
Yeah. Well, that's really all the questions I really have for you. How can people find you on social media, keep up with you?
Yeah, appreciate that. Mark_T_Willard on Twitter, MT Willard on Instagram. That's where I'm hanging out most of the time on social media. So look forward to seeing you there.
Awesome, man. We really appreciate it. Enjoy opening day. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, you too, man.